We return to the world of beginnings. Um, Around you, the world is, as expected, gray and foggy, and everything's just shifting through the air. As you're walking along, you hear something rather fascinating. You're not sure what it is. At first, it's just like a. Eventually, the sound of something, it sounds like falling, some massive piece falling and breaking against things, is just getting perpetually louder and louder, and the depth of the sound is so far that at this point you feel like you're not simply hearing it anymore. It's you hear it, you feel it through your bones. It reverberates, and then eventually it fades as it just continues falling, and the sound vanishes somewhere below you, beyond you. You're not sure. It came from somewhere and then left again. You've heard this before, you think? Kind of thing, things falling from extremely high up, just falling way beyond where you're standing and off somewhere. You've never seen these pieces, but they must be massive judging by the sound of it. You make your way through the streets some more. This time taking a bit of a longer walk. You're further away this time. And trudging along, eventually you hear another one, although not quite as large, and they're breaking off and down into the distance. And silence. Once again, just the stagnant air around you, kind of shifting and holding in place. You turn a corner, and ahead of you on the street you see the familiar firelight breaking from between the boards. Walking forward, you see once again familiar little shack with dark brown graying wood. Shifted door, currently open a bit, not very far, but it's currently spilling light out onto the road around you. You go and you open the door, and there you see the figure of Soren Lestrade sitting across from the fire. Welcome, welcome. Come on in. I have a story for you. Since we currently finished with Baron, perhaps there's a new place we would like to go. Come in, come in. He beckons you in, shows you your seats. Same log configurations, although some of them this time actually, you're not sure where from, but they seem to have cushions on them. A little bit dusty, but so far very pleasant. And as you sit down, and he talks to you, and he says, "All right, close your eyes. We have a place to go. Go on, come on." You close your eyes. You let the sifting happen around you, and as you open them again, you find yourself once again in the forest of bottles. Around you, just endless void, hanging from the skies, many thousands of hanging bottles. Some of them massive, some of them reasonably small, all hanging from invisible threads from the skies. As you look up, you can't see where it goes. It's simply a void, an abyss going off into the distance. Below you, you're standing on what feels like ground, very flat, and just above it, there's about an inch thick layer of water. So, Soren says as he moves around and he goes back. We're going back to Ruminara, apparently. I'm sure all these bottles will be opened eventually. He goes forward and he once again picks up the massive bottle that is the one that is now familiar as Ruminara, which currently has 4 little lights gleaming very close together within the center of it. And in the center you can see, within this bottle you can see this diorama. The land with vivid greens and beautiful blues, extreme yellows and reds, this beautiful earth and brown, colors that you don't see in the outside world. Outside it is simply gray, and here these colors flash out at you. Well, go on. You have the bottle now, as he's pointing to you. You currently holding the bottle. All you have to do is uncork it. So you take the moment, kind of relishing the feeling this time. It's been a while, but it's nice. You pull out the cork and you feel yourself be pulled and tugged into the bottle. And there within it, you feel, just for that briefest moment looking out, you see yourself, both outside and inside. This duality of your vision coming from two spaces at once. It's really strange until you fall far enough and you shrink far enough inside this bottle that the edges of the glass just turn to sky. And then, as you turn further, you see yourself falling towards Ruminara. And as you fall downwards, you see, once again, this map. And underneath the map, you see the same vivid greens and reds and blues and yellows. This time in a landscape, fully unfolding around you, everywhere. Thorin floats down beside you and says, "Today we're going somewhere else. We're not going to Noom anymore. We've been there a few times. Now it's time to go somewhere else. But before I take you there, perhaps I need to show you a bit of something about this world." And he kind of like shifts your shoulders just a little bit into place. And he says, "We're going here." And he dives. And as you begin to dive with this immense speed, you see yourself moving towards this chasm between the western and eastern continents. Just straight towards the water, just straight down. And as you reach the water, you figure you're going to stop, that you're going to land on a tiny island or something, but no. Straight into the water, and you keep going down. It's a lot darker under the water. It's as would be expected. You feel like you should be moving more slowly, but you're not as you're rocketing through the water. And it gets darker around you. And darker. And darker until you can almost see nothing anymore. Looking up, you can just barely see the semblances of light shining through the water just a little bit until eventually that fades out as well, and around you is simply darkness. At this point, these four small motes of light appear in the water around you. Standing across from you or floating in the water, is Soren Lestrade. So we are currently in Leadra's Chasm, and this goes way down, and we'll go down a bit further first, and the reason why I need to show you this is to explain how this is. You see up there, those are the realms of Ruminara. That is the world. But as we go down, and he moves his hand a bit, and beyond, just barely past the motes of light, you see a rock face going down, and on top of the rock face, you see a cavern going inward into the rock, into the land. That is one of many thousands, tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of cave systems, stretched beyond the entirety of Ruminara. They're everywhere. These are called the Underdark. They are a unique and, in some ways, rather forbidden land. But that's not where we want to go today. It's important that you notice here, underneath the world, there is another world entirely. And as we go deeper and begin sinking further and faster, and you didn't figure it could get darker, but it does, as everything around you becomes so dark you feel it clenching in on you, it's closing in on you. And then eventually, you feel yourself stop. You have no idea how you're stopping, or how you know that you're stopping. There's no recognizable points around you with which to tell that nothing is moving anymore. And once again, four little motes of light. As Soren points downward, and he says, "Down there, that is something. Something very unique," as he moves his hand, and the little globules of light go downwards. And the strangest thing happens. At the very base, you can see as the chasm moves together, and it reaches a bottom point. But the strangest thing is at the crack where the rock faces should be meeting, you see this immensely dark line where they should be coming together, but you can see that it's still broken. They don't meet. That is where we might go, but I don't think we should. You see, just as we crossed the water and we entered the threshold down into the Underdark, this is another threshold. It goes down even further, as beyond this there is the Abyss. Maybe eventually we'll go there. Not today. But it's important to know that below the world, underneath the world, there is yet another one. Nobody knows what's underneath the Abyss. Nobody really wants to know because that would require going through the Abyss to find it. Let me take you back up. Simply keep in mind that this world goes very far down. He snaps his finger and you feel yourself, for a moment it's like you're being dragged up, and then you feel yourself pulled along just a little bit, as skyrocketing through the water again, until it suddenly becomes brighter and brighter and brighter and out of the water. And beside that just obvious feeling of darkness encroaching on you everywhere, suddenly the colors that are around you are insane. It's blinding for a moment. So you calm, you blink a few times, you look around, and you're back. High up in the sky, looking down, seeing the map and the world below it. So today where we're going is a fun little place. We are going to a city called Solswin. As you begin falling a little bit further, you move towards the center of the map. Towards Ambra, he calls it. We barely touched on this place. As to the west you can see Noom and Felwyn, and within the center you see Leendar. Last time we stopped, as you might recall, Baron was just barely outside Leendar. But that's not where we're going today. In fact, we're going a bit further south. If you look towards the edge, you find Lorehaven and Torloch. And beyond that island, within the small narrow sea that is between Ambra and the little offshoot, you see Solswin. Just on an island within that little ocean? Maybe on its own? Hard to tell. So let's go there. And as you fall, and you're moving towards this place called Solswin, past the fallow leaf forests, past the Death Moon Pass. Just briefly on the side you can see Lorehaven and Torloch, two cities, very different though, as Lorehaven seems to rise up in this Minas Tirith spire form out of the waters, while Torloch is this sprawling mass of tiny huts is what it feels like, and then you whoosh past them. And as you make it over to Solswin, it is very strange. You've not ever seen a city like this. In fact, as you circle around it briefly before eventually moving in towards the city itself, you see that it is not on an island, it is built into the ocean. As far as you can tell, it is this circular structure of walls rising up far enough that the water doesn't go in. And in between those walls are houses and towers and buildings and mansions and everything of all sorts and kinds. It's like somebody took a castle with walls and placed it in the ocean. And as you fly in, and you land a bit. And Solswin is a bit of a strange place. Unlike most of the other places that we've been, it gives you a different feeling because it doesn't seem as if it's in time with everything else. You can't tell what time it is here. You know that this land is old. But being here tells you nothing about what time period it is. Now Soren comes up beside you. Solswin is unique. It is, interestingly enough, completely absent from all time of the rest of the world, and yet at the same time it is so bound to time, it's impressive. Looking around you, you see a lot of the buildings. So you have the streets, kind of closed off on all sides everywhere, and next to the streets you have buildings. There's no grass point, there's no land, it's just streets and buildings everywhere. And the strangest things about the buildings is as they rise up past the streets, you see that easily 50 or 60% of the buildings are being worked on. There's construction everywhere, just always upwards. All of the buildings have structures being built on top of them, up into the sky. And as you walk a bit through the streets of Solswin, you see that this seems to happen to a lot of the streets as well, that as you're walking through, you see that above the street that you're currently on, there's a second street, built at the level of the new houses that are being built up on top. And then as you walk towards the walls, you see that the walls are perpetually being built up. There's more walls on top of the walls. You turn around, but Soren's no longer there. And as you look around, you see a few figures dart by. First, you see this young kid running past you. Looks maybe 13, 14. Cropped, short brown hair, not particularly well kept, it's just all over the place. Then, going from a different direction past this intersection, you see a woman in her 20s. Seems to be has some form of leather garb. It's not particularly armor. It seems more, it's tinted a very slight green. And it's got this huge amount of just pouches and pieces and sockets and everything. And there's little glass vials, and there's some metal contraption on the side, and on her back she just has this backpack filled with things. On her forehead you see these goggles, with one of them as this like split cracked lens. And then as she vanishes down a side path, finally what you see is this elderly lady walking along, wearing fairly ornate orange, or this faded pastel orange robes, go almost to her feet. On her head she has this small hat, little brim, pointed a little bit. And as with the other on her back, she has a backpack, a lot smaller though, not filled with nearly as many things. As she also crosses the intersection and leaves down a side alley. So my question to you is, since we don't have Soren to guide us here, who do we follow? Do we follow the kid? Do we follow the lady with the cracked lens goggles? Or do we follow the elderly woman in the long orange coat? Alright, I'm seeing one vote for the elder. Alright. Are we going with the elderly lady? Well, we seem to have... Are we doing... Well, we currently have 2 votes for each, I don't know. Alright, well, if we're happy with the kid, then we'll go with the kid, I guess. Then, you try running down the side path, finding the kid. And it takes you a whole while to find the kid. You're not sure where you ran. And looking up and down the streets, eventually you find him, just kind of looking down into a well. As he just has like pebbles in that, he's going... Eventually they down at the bottom. Just throwing one after the other down to the well. Looks around. Make sure no one's looking. He looks straight at you. And then past you. Doesn't seem to see you at the current point in time. And then somehow confident that no one's looking, he gets out like piece of charcoal, moves to the side of the well, starts scrawling something. You look over his shoulder, you see, like, in badly written handwriting with several mistakes, you see how he writes, Rylath was here. As you expect Rylath to be his name, although you're not sure if he wrote it correctly. And then as he wrote that down, puts away the charcoal, looks around once more, makes sure no one's there. Then he climbs over the well and starts climbing in. You're like, you for a moment you're like, what? What do we do about this kid? But you can't. Like as you move around, you realize you can't actually interact with things. You're not currently here. You're just watching. And so you move to the center of to the edge of the well, and you look down in, and you see as he's using kind of his hands to climb a bit, but at the same time has the rope of a bucket wrapped around his legs to hold him in place every now and then. As he is surprisingly adept at this. He's pretty good at this. He climbs down, he makes his way down. He reaches the bottom. And then he's standing in the bottom of a well. And you're not sure what he's doing down there as you make your way down after him, and this is the strangest feeling, since for most of the Baron story you just kind of were with Baron at all times. There was no issue in that, but here you feel yourself actually having to follow this poor kid down whatever this well is, and it's kind of exhausting on your arms. I'm not sure how he did it that quickly. He was pretty good at it. And the kid looks around. And he gets his pebbles back and he puts them down and puts them back in. You're not sure why these pebbles seem to be important to him. They just look like rocks, but who knows how a kid's mind works. And so you watch him for a bit. He's looking around. And he just hangs out in the well for a bit. Walks around, sits down. And it's a strange feeling. You're not sure why you're down here with this kid. He doesn't seem to be doing much down here. He's just kind of hanging out. Sitting there. You're not sure if he's waiting for something, or if he's just passing the time. Eventually he starts taking the pebbles out, and he tosses it against the wall, and tink, as the little piece of rock hits, well, the rock of the well side. And then he goes and he picks up the pebble again, and he throws it again. He does this for like an hour. It's mind-boggling. You wonder whether you should have followed someone else, because obviously the kid's just going to sit in the well until eventually he just... And he throws it a bit differently. Instead of the tink sound that you expected to hear each time, it makes a... as it hits the wall, and it makes a bit more of a hollow sound. And the kid looks up. For the first point actually interested in something since this monotony of throwing rocks at a wall started. Picks up the pebble again. Gets a few more pebbles. Throws like 5 of them at once. And he stands up, he gets the pebbles, move over to the wall, kind of puts his hand against it. As the strange hollow sound keeps emanating from the rock, which is, well, rocks shouldn't do that. Especially not solidly built ones. And Rylath kind of moves forward and moves around, looking around in his pockets and such, until he takes out like this small knife. And that, like this knife, it doesn't look particularly sharp. It could be at best maybe like a butter knife, or like one for eating, well, vegetables. But he has it. So he'd been scraping away at some of the mortar around the rocks, trying to free one of the rocks that were hollow. Eventually he gets to free a bit, and he starts pulling the rock. And he grasps his fingers in a bit, and he rolls the rock out of the way until it falls into the water at the bottom of the well, and he can see through. And this is the weird thing that you weren't expecting. The well is normally insulated from the outside to stop the water from going, but here, beyond it, instead of a direct rock or dirt wall, it's just black. It's just darkness beyond it. Obviously, Rylath wasn't expecting this either. He looks in, tries to peek, but he can't see anything. It's too dark on the inside. And so he begins to like slowly chip away at the mortar on the other pieces of rock around it, and begins to open up this passageway out into whatever this darkness is beyond. And as he opens it up further, just barely this light from outside the well coming in, sunlight around noonish, flashes in. You can see beyond this water, there's what appears to be a pathway going between stone walls going up. Most of the edge of the wall that you can see of the well seems to also have stone behind it, but not this point. He opens it here, and he looks around, and he looks up, and takes a moment, and then, ever the intrepid adventurer, he just climbs on through. And for a moment, you're like, oh, you've got to be kidding me. No. Kid, you can't do this. Please, stop. For a moment, you just remember having to crawl down into this well, and remembering that at the end, you'll probably have to crawl up, and you're watching this kid crawl through a hole that's probably too small for you. Well, fine. As you crawl in, you try to make your way through, and you squeeze and squirm and make your way in. And as you get past the rocks that form the outside of the well, you fall down onto a bit of a stone floor. Stone pathway. This is not just rock. That's strange. It's like chiseled stone. Pieces, it's a road. And Rylath looks around. He looks over, looks around him. You kind of follow his gaze, and you can see just barely in the light, now that your eyes have adjusted to the darkness just a little bit, the pathway forward. There's an intersection kind of coming off at a diagonal angle, going off into two directions you can't see, as pushed up against this road at all sides, everywhere, are just walls going up from ground up into wherever you expect the street that you walked on just beforehand, before you climbed down into this well, where you expect that to be. And as you look up, and you think of the layout of where the well currently is, you look up again. And you get the strange sensation that directly above you is the street you were just walking on. There's a street directly underneath the street. And it brings back these thoughts of how beforehand, when you were walking, you saw another street being built above the one that you're currently on. It's like layers of the city are just being built upwards with each generation. Something doesn't quite click. Because they're building up, and they're building up, and they're building up, and you can tell, or at least there's 3 generations of this happening. And you think, but the walls just barely went up beyond the water level. The well was downward. And as you were thinking that, you realized you completely lost track of where Rylath went. And you look around for a bit, and you're like, oh god, where'd he go? Oh no. This is bad. So you run forward, and you see the intersection. And looking around you, see a pathway going down. Another one. And then barely at the end of the pathway going diagonally far away from you, you see like a little bit of a firelight. Like a match or something. You're like, okay, we're going that way. As you sprint down there, and as you get closer, you eventually see Rylath with little matches. He's lighting a lantern. There's a small one that he had on him. He holds it up and he looks around. And now that you've been thinking about this, you realize that this is the same street layout as just one previously above you. Beside you are buildings, and looking through them, you can just barely, within this extreme dust, you can see shuttered and nailed closed are windows and doors. There's houses here, and as you go up to one of them, as Rylath seems to be just looking around as well for now, you go up and look in through one of the cracks, and within it you see it's a bit strange. It's very dark inside, but thanks to the light that Rylath has, you can see a little bit, and you can see the edges of maybe a table and like a wooden stool of which one of the legs is broken, and heaped on top of most of this is just rock and rubble. Huge amounts of it, especially against all of the walls, just positioned for structure maybe, to keep all of the walls in a very specific place. This is the strangest construction you've ever seen. It's like... It's like they have to keep building up. And then with each time they keep building up, they just move upward one building and fill in whatever was below them. Very weird. Not sure what it means. You begin to follow Rylath again as he keeps going down a path. Down another one. Eventually he makes his way over to what looks like a staircase. There is no light because everything is blocked off completely. There is no light. The only light that you currently have is from the lantern that Rylath is holding. There's the street, and then all of the buildings are directly next to it. So as you go underneath this street, it's essentially a cavern. It's just this. Yeah, it's essentially just a pathway through rock. Everywhere is just rock of different kinds. All of it textured because it's all carved. It's all masonry. They built this and placed it. And following Rylath, you see as beside one of the houses, he finds something rather interesting because this is the first time you've seen this now within this town. You see beside one of the buildings is what seems to be a fairly large one, judging by the length that you walked along the street to get to the edge of it. And there at the side of it, instead of directly connecting to the street, there's a narrow place, about a meter wide, with just stairs going down into darkness. And Rylath, being the adventurer that he is, just immediately starts walking down. And the more you think about it, the more you realize you have absolutely no idea how to get back to the well. Like, you don't remember what paths you took several at this point. And you're sure that it's an extremely bad idea that, like, 12 or 13-year-old kid is currently walking alone through pitch black underneath the city. But you have no way to stop him, so you follow him, just to see. As he walks down the stairs, you get hit by the strangest sense of déjà vu. Because around you is darkness, and this dust and the buildings, and it's the exact same layout as the layer that you were just on, just one more layer down. Although you notice that the longer you look at it, and the longer you walk around with Rylath, you realize that it's just very slightly different. As you look at the masonry, you realize that some of the carving techniques are different. You realize that some of the structure of the house is different. There's certain engravings and pieces here and there, both on the last level and on this one, as you see the differences between each generation of the levels that were built. And looking around, even in this faint light, as you look and you see the amount of dust that's settled here, you can tell that this level has been underground for far longer than the previous one. And following Rylath found another set of stairs going down even further, and at this point you feel like you know what's going to happen as you go down underground. It's the same encroaching darkness that you felt underneath the waves as you had first drifted and fallen down into the trench with Soren Lestrade. The same encroaching darkness, this stagnant air that just holds there, as the only light that you have is this light from Rylath, this tiny little flickering flame. You're not sure how this kid can possibly be so fearless walking around in a place of absolute darkness of which he has no idea if there's anything down here. And yet he continues. Keeps walking. And now on this new level, you're now 3 levels down underneath the original street level. You tell the same things from previously. It's the same layout. Everything's built the same, but it's also different as more of these unique carvings come out. As you can tell, this layer was built at a time when there was maybe a lot of art in stonemasonry and chipping these pieces. Up on the level that you were on at first, the sunlight level that you had dropped down to, most of the stones were just blocks. They were very minimalistic. Down here they were more ornate. With each level they were becoming more ornate. It was an odd sensation, and down here, as with the previous level, although at this point it was hard to tell because the layers of dust just everywhere, completely everywhere. And as you continue following Rylath, moves around, He finds another set of stairs, but he doesn't go down this time. Instead, he walks around past the stairs. Moves past it. And for the first time down here, you see a different light apart from the one that Rylath has been holding. As this very faint greenish light is coming from between some of the boards in one of the houses. Rylath immediately, of course, runs over, sprints, sets down the lantern, and tries looking through the boards to see what's inside. And as he looks inside, you stand next to him, you look with him. It's an empty room. Hello. Yay. And as he looks in, it's not filled like the previous one that he looked at. It didn't have stones everywhere in it. It was completely empty. And from all of the walls, ceiling, floor, everywhere, there's just this very faintly glowing green moss, except for on this small metal plaque on the far wall. And Rylath immediately gets out a little knife and he starts chipping away, moving away, trying to get the nails out of the board so that he can climb in through the window. And it takes him a bit. Clink, clink, cling. And eventually he gets the boards off. This kid's pretty sporty, pretty athletic for like 13. It's kind of impressive. Moves that away, he moves the boards out of the way, and he starts inching his way through, and he pulls them through and drops himself on the other side. And this opening's even smaller than the one to the well, and you're really not sure how you're going to make your way through. As you begin climbing, kind of strange things happen, as it's still exhausting, but no matter how small it seems to be, you just kind of wink, as it kind of, you like shift a bit and pull yourself through, even though you never should have been able to fit through that space. Definitely not. As you land on the inside, you see as Rylath looks around, and as he goes up to the plaque on the other side and looks down at it, and he tries to read it, and as you look at it, it seems to be in a script that you can't read currently. You don't know if Rylath can. He's not seen this. You've never seen this. It's not the writing that you've seen Baron use previously in the stories. It's this intricate swooping lines. Kind of like cursive, but a lot more height differences between the letters. It's kind of elegant. It's very foreign. You're not sure what it means. Very, very loopy, strangely enough. And so here the question is, what is Rylath going to do? Is Rylath going to leave, or is he going to try to investigate the room some more? Yeah, so he can either see what's beyond the moss, try looking at what's past it, or he can leave and see what's down the stairs. We're cowards, we investigate. Alright, so that seems to be the thing. We are going to investigate. So somehow equally interested in all of this as Rylath seems to be, you're wondering, where does this come from? There's not been any moss anywhere else. You're like, where could this possibly have been from? And as Rylath looking around, same as you, kind of moves away some of the moss. He finds a bottle, and on this one, it's broken. Like kind of shattered around the edges, and on it is this little label, kind of hanging on a little strap around the neck. And on the label, written in common, which you can thankfully read, it says, "Do not break," which is really unfortunate, as Rylath kind of looks at the bottle a little bit. He wonders what was inside, and just barely inside, you can see the very traces of maybe moss. He looks around, and you looking around with him. You see as this slightly luminous moss is shifting slightly. It's just moving a bit. And along the walls and ceiling, it's becoming thinner. As down towards the corner and moving towards Rylath, it's starting to build up. As it's becoming larger and moving upwards and building upwards around Rylath. And Rylath takes a moment and he's like, this is not okay, as he sprints his way back towards me. Like, the moss starts gripping at his feet a bit. And you feel like it probably would do the same at yours if it could, but it doesn't seem to be able to, as it seems to try to grip at yours, but it misses. But it's strange, because the first thing that has actually noticed that you are here. So far, nobody and nothing has been able to tell that you were here, but this seems to actively be grasping towards you, which is very strange to you. And it's making Rylath move a bit more slowly. And he makes it to the window, but he's trying to climb through. It's not quite working entirely, and so realizing that you're not sure how, but you have a tiny hold in this world. Not much of one, but a tiny bit, as you try to help Rylath by stomping out the moss next to his feet. And it doesn't seem to do much, but with each handprint you put down, with each stomp you place down on the moss around it, it seems to move away a bit, trying to grasp at you, and with each one, his foot becomes just very barely free, until he manages to climb through the window, and he's out. And you follow, you move out, and you're like, okay, we can breathe for a moment. At least you think that, until you see that the moss is slowly building up and moving up the windowsill and coming out the window. And at this point, Rylath picks up his lantern and he starts sprinting down the road. You're not sure if he's even going the right direction. He's going somewhere, but probably not the right way. And he just keeps running and running, and you run after him. And as he keeps running straight, you get the feeling that it's not entirely straight. It's descending slightly. Very slightly, at least. And then a bit more, as you realize you're actually going deeper and deeper, and at this point, you're not sure what's causing it, but this level isn't straight anymore, it shifts. As it's lower on one side than on the other as you're running. Maybe the weight from the city above it causes it to press down further. Maybe there's something heavy up further above. And as you're running, following him, he runs and he leaves and he tries finding stairs, but there's no way up. Just seems to go down and down, but he's running, he needs to find a way out. And then he stops. Because before you, there's the road stops. There's just the wall. And you realize where you've reached. You've reached the end of the city. These huge blocks of stone, much larger than any of the pieces that were used to build the houses. Huge pieces with iron studs in them, partially to keep them in place, tower up and go upwards as you've reached the wall. And as you look around, Rylath turns around and he slows again for a bit, as he feels like he's reasonably far enough away from the moss. At least he thinks so. He moves forward. He moves around. Doesn't recognize this place. And as he continues, suddenly you find a strange thing. This is the first portion of the city that isn't the same as everywhere else, as all of the levels previously. As moving down, suddenly there's no more floor. And Rylath stops, puts down the lantern, he gets down on his knees and he looks, and down below, the road stops, and you can look down, and it just goes down into darkness. One level further down, you can see just barely at the edges of the light that the lantern's giving, reflecting slightly back, you see same portions where the deeper levels of the city had done the same, as it looks like this place wasn't supporting anymore and it just it's just a hole. It's just a crevice down into way down somewhere. And as you look down, you realize what's happening. As this breaking makes sense. The city, it's not simply there. It's constantly sinking. With every new generation, it sinks a bit, which is why they always build up. Because they have to, otherwise the entire city goes underwater. And you wonder where it sinks, and you remember what Soren Lestrade said about there being a world below the world, and then the abyss below that. As you look down and you realize that, similarly to the place beforehand, similarly to the crack in the trench, where the edges of the trench came together and yet didn't. There was that darkness in the center, what Soren Lestrade called the threshold to the abyss. And as you look down, down, you don't really see an end to this. It's hard to see particularly far, it's just dark. But you wonder if not, at the bottom of this sea, underneath where Solswin is, there's another one of these thresholds. Into darkness, into the Underdark, and then eventually into the abyss and downward. Whether with each moment it sinks further and further and further into this space. And for a moment you wonder about that. And you begin to get up. And you see Rylath starting to get up as well. As he places a footfold down, he slips on the rock. And for a moment you turn, and you see as Rylath is just slowly falling down into darkness. So what are you going to do? Are you going to jump after him? Oh, kill the kid. Well, are you going to jump after him? Alright, that's two people saying we jump. Okay, well, carefully going after him is a little bit difficult since this place, it doesn't go down this way, it doesn't even inward, it's the opening to a much larger cavern or chasm going downward, which means there is no ledge or foothold or anything to start climbing down on, it just goes down. They're not straight walls, they actually bow outwards. Alright, well, I'm seeing a few votes for go after him. So I guess for that moment, as you see him slip, and he begins falling, and you hear his yell as he falls, and it just goes into silence, and you're like, nope, this can't be happening, we gotta watch this kid as you just leap off the side and dive bomb downward. For a moment as you're diving, you realize, I have no light down there, and with your foot just barely you catch the lantern as it tumbles and falls down. And the strange thing happens as you are falling. You become faster and faster. You can feel the wind going past you, falling down. And with the lantern that's falling next to you, you can see just barely as Rylath falling as he is falling more slowly than you since you dove. As you're going down, and within the shimmering light of the falling lantern, you see level after level after level after level after level. You go easily 20, 30, 40, 50 levels down. Each generation building up on the previous one, but you're going too quickly to see the unique details of each of them. And you're falling. And eventually the cavern, this crevasse, wides out so far that you can't see the walls in the light anymore, as you are just falling through what feels like endless darkness. Just void. And the wind gets slower. And then it's just a very faint breeze as you're falling. You know you should be falling extremely quickly, but you're not. As you drop, and you land. And below you, you feel... Well, below you is a whole lot of rubble. Looking at it, it's rocks and street pieces. Most of it are just rocks of different forms and different sizes, as this is the mound of everything that came toppling down from above. The entirety of this broken together chasm of rocks is heaped up in this one pile all together, being held by something. Hard to say what. You and Rylath are both slowed enough, and you stop on top of this rubble, not hurt, falling like a feather. The lantern unfortunately does not get that, as it just breaks and shatters down on the rocks and then falls, and the flame goes out. Lights for a few more moments and then it's out. And you are in pitch darkness. Complete another blackness. And then, from within the blackness, you hear a sound. Sound of water. A waterfall. Not a large one, just a small trickling, just... Not the massive roaring of a big waterfall, but just from something, a little stream is coming out and filling downward. And then around you, through the darkness, just barely ahead of you, you think you can see something. You squint, and you're sure of it. It's the briefest glint of firelight. Not a small lantern, it's a larger fire, coming from further down. And as you look closer, just barely at the sides, you think you can make out the sides of a street. You're not sure. You look towards Rylath. He's slowly climbing down the rubble, making his way downward, seemingly in the same direction, as he seems to have seen the same thing that you did. And as you make your way down, you find yourself at, for now, the edge of this rubble pile, but you can tell that beyond it, you are just on a street that's currently being held up by the rubble pile because it's slightly pushed upward by rubble that's gone underneath it, and you can tell that this whatever mound that you are standing on is far greater than whatever you can see so far. You and Rylath walk down the pathway. At this point, probably several kilometers underneath the earth. You look around, and the stones here are interesting because, similarly to the levels that you had been on previously, it's built in the same structures. But there are different carvings on these. This one seemed to be letters. The same ones that you had seen up on top on the plaque, these loopy letters. Swinging large glyphs in a way almost. Symbols scrawled in on a lot of the bricks. And ahead of you, you and Rylath make your way forward. And eventually you come to the edge of where you can actually start to see the light, and you can see that it is, funnily enough, probably in the same place or in a place where a well was previously, as it is a little open plaza with what looks like a round structure going up from bottom to top. And within this area is a small bonfire, and sitting at the bonfire, back turned towards you, you see a figure. Do you want to approach the figure? Looks humanoid so far. Go towards the figure. Have a little chat. We're only several kilometers underneath the ground. Alright, let's see what they have to say about it, I guess. So Rylath kind of looks around. He walks towards the figure. And there's a very light tapping sound of his feet. Foot falls on the ground. The figure turns around. And within the light, it is the strangest sense as sitting here, far, far below this entire world, you see the elderly lady in the orange garb. A little pointed hat with the brim, a little backpack on her back, which is currently set to the side of her as she's sitting by the fire. As this look of shock just comes on her face as she sees Rylath walking around here. And then this kinder, more motherly expression comes in. She says, "Oh dear, oh dear, oh dear. How did you get down here? You're not supposed to be here. What's your name?" My name's Rylath. Nice to meet you, Rylath. My name is Madeline. You really shouldn't be here, but unfortunately I can't take you up just about now. But for now, maybe you should stay with me. This place is not a safe place to be. What were you looking for down here? Rylath's voice seems to catch in his throat a bit. Like, I don't know. I came through a well. Saying that as if that explains everything. Alright, Rylath. Well, how about you sit down a spell for me? Take a weight off. Have some sleep. You look pretty dusted up. She comes up and stands up a little bit, but still doesn't stand up further to be taller than him. She stays below his eye level, and she kind of pats down the shoulders a bit, getting off some of the massive amounts of dust that he got from wandering around and everything. And then Madeline turns to you. And she looks at you and she says, "You're a strange one too, aren't you? I don't know if you're supposed to be here. Maybe it's fortunate that you are." Rylath is taken care of now. If you wish, you can stay here with me. I can tell you a bit. Or you can look around on your own if you wish. This place has much to offer. What would you like to do? Would you like to stay, or would you go like to explore on your own some more? Now that Rylath seems to be taken care of. So it's either stay here and talk to Madeline for a bit, or it's to go off on your own and try to look and investigate the ruins in this place yourself. See if you can find a way further down or up, whatever you want. Oh, we've got two opinions now. What are we gonna do? We need a tiebreaker, guys. No, I think a third option would just mean that a third person would just... Anyone want to do tiebreaker? Alright, you know what we're gonna do? We're gonna flip a coin. So, we're gonna go for, Heads is exploring, no, Heads is staying to talk, and Tails is exploring further. Okay. It is Tails. I don't know if you can see that on the camera. I don't know if that's focusing. Is that visible? A little bit? Which means we're exploring further. So, take a moment. You nod to Madeline. Nods back. Alright. See what you can find. Good luck. She says, and he turns away from you, taking care of Rylath a bit more. Rylath seems kind of confused by the fact that she's just talking to air, according to him. But doesn't seem to make much of it. He seems pretty tired at this point. And so you take the time. You turn around. And you start moving back into the darkness. And now, unfettered by being with Rylath, an interesting thing happens. Your vision is no longer just dark. You can see. Not particularly well, it's just different grays, but you can see without the light. You see around you a bit. And moving through the city, it's interesting in it. The further you move, even though it's smaller here, something about this feels extremely familiar. And you continue along trying to find a way down. And here and there you find some stairs, you make your way down through the caverns. And down through the ends. And at that point, eventually, you find another similar one of these crevices. And this time, knowing that you're not entirely here, knowing that you have this possibility, you take your time, and you jump down into the crevice, down into the darkness. And now in the darkness, it's interesting. You can see better, and so you can see as all the levels swoop past you. And this crevice is even larger than the last one. It just goes down and down, and you pass another 50, another 100 levels, and you keep going. It keeps going. And some more. And beside you, you can see as the levels are becoming larger. The distance between the floor and the top is taller. It's bigger. And as around you, a very familiar feeling begins coming. Same feeling you had in the trench below. As, even though you can see this time, you can still feel the weight of being so far under the earth that it feels like everything above you could collapse down on you at any given time. And yet you continue falling. And beside you somewhere you hear a sound, which isn't expected, but something seems to be falling much faster than you. As you look beside, you see something as this huge piece of rock seems to have broken significantly further up, and larger than you as it is. This falls beyond you and down into the pit, further and further, and further down. And ahead of you, just barely, you find yourself falling. And at one point, you get the strangest sensation of passing something. Around you, there's nothing to give you the indication that anything's happened here. And yet, you can feel you've fallen past the threshold. You are no longer in the world. You've fallen out and down into the abyss. And yet around you, the city still continues down and down. And eventually, after falling for what feels like forever, you see something. Most of this has just been wide and downward, this column going down with layers and layers on all sides, on all edges. And here, coming out from one of the layers, you see this little pathway, precariously still built, and for a moment you're like, I'm going to land there. and you drift and you fall, and as you land on it, and you make your way just off into a portion that seems more safe, as it falls and breaks apart, and the pieces just start. And then, once again, silence. Around you is strange, stagnant air. The layer goes up around you until you can't actually see the ceiling anymore, just these massive grayish stone foundation blocks going up into the sky past the dust into a void that you can't see anymore. And you begin walking down the street. And you look around, and ahead of you is an intersection. No one here. You look down the intersection, it just goes into darkness on both sides. You begin to walk around. And the longer you walk, the more you get used to this feeling of around you just these large buildings reaching up into the sky. Into the darkness, into the void. You know that below you it keeps going, but you don't know how far. Above you it's many, many kilometers. You don't know how deep you are at this point. You're so far down that you're below another world. And walking along, a strange familiar sensation comes up. Walking past. Walk down the street. You look down an intersection and just very barely, very, very faintly, you think you see firelight, very barely flickering from between the buildings. And you take the moment and you start jogging over, but it's not there then when you arrive. And you arrive at a point here, between all of these foundations building up. You see a strange little thing, very familiar. And at the same time, it's very different from the way that you expect it to be. As in front of you is a small wooden shack. Dark brown boards with dust all over them. With a door that's very slightly off its hinge. It's opened a little bit, and looking inside it's dark. As there is the remnants of what might have been logs for a small fire, and around this little fire, inside this tiny little wooden shack with no roof, there are logs, and sitting at the far wall, on the far bench, you can just barely see the sitting figure of a person, skeleton in clothes. As that is where we're going to end tonight. I hope you enjoyed that. I had a lot of fun. Solswin is a great place to be. And as said, there is a poll on the channel. You can vote to see if we stay in Leandar, we'll see where we go, or if we want to go somewhere new. That's up to you. For now, I enjoyed this very much. I'm glad you were all here. And I'll see you again next week at 8. Bye.